Senza Forchetta.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Senza Forchetta. Today, I have the pleasure of being here with an old friend, David Cai. Hello, David.
Hello, Gio.
How are you?
Good. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Despite all the world occurrences, today we're gonna try to talk about some philosophical concepts as well, and try to make some sense as to what is happening to a deeper level. But first, maybe you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about you.
Sure. My name's David. I was one of Gio's classmates at St. Gallen about 5 years ago, and right now I work as a full-time trader.
Very nice. How's that going? The trading.
It's going well.
Very nice. And where are you located?
I'm in Toronto, where
Very nice.
I grew up, basically.
But you also your background is from China, right?
Right. My family moved to Toronto when I was 5, and then from China, where I was born. Right. I basically grew up in Toronto and spent some time abroad for university, for instance, in the U.S. and Switzerland.
Very nice. You studied in NYE, right? No,
Right.
NYU.
I went to NYU for my bachelor's, and then I did a double degree in St. Gallen and also HEC.
Very nice. Very nice. And how has life been since the graduation from the that university?
Well, I would say that I feel more in my own element, so to speak. I consider myself an introverted person, and I guess going to St. Gallen in this sort of very small, tight knit group of students, our class, we had a lot of gatherings. We got to know each other really well. But then when I got home, I guess I went back to my natural mode of being, which is to be by myself, to like to read books and I guess trade stocks, so to speak.
I remember you were always very prepared and reading a lot, always on top of things, right?
I would consider myself someone who likes to prepare, tries to prepare as much as possible, yet somehow always fails to slightly underprepare. I consider myself a perpetual underpreparer, but I am rather ambitious in the preparation itself.
Yeah, I remember that. But actually, we got in touch uh, recently because you spoke to a friend of ours, Manuel, and yeah, he also mentioned that I have this podcast, yeah, which is still an experimental phase, and that you watched one of my video that was a message to God,
Yeah.
and that sparked your curiosity, and then you also read a book about, and I'm gonna say the name wrong, and David knows, Eckhart Tolle. Is that correct? Did I say correct?
I think it's pronounced Tolle in German, Eckhart Tolle.
Okay, there you go. You have the perfect pronunciation there. Um, the what is which one? The New World, right? Or which one did you
I
read?
read his oldest and original text, The Power of Now.
The Power of Now, which I think I also read that one, or I read the New World, I think, but the concept should be similar in that.
Yeah, I agree.
And then actually we started talking about what it means to be alive, what it means to be a human, and we kind of got deep into the topic, and we thought, why? What better way to actually reconnect and to kind of talk about this thing without claiming to know the truth, but just have points of reflection that could inspire us to maybe think in a different way from what we are usually accustomed to. And actually, I want to ask you, what did you think about the video that I made? That I know it's a little bit confusing, but I'm actually interested about to hear your opinion on it.
Sure. So when I watched his video, I saw the title, "A Message to God," which I found very intriguing, and so I opened it. Of course, seeing an old friend making such interesting and novel content like this definitely made me smile. So when I watched it, I found the video quite wide-ranging and ambitious in its goals, right? So it covered a wide range of topics ranging from consciousness and perception and
Ego.
ego, a false self, a true self, etc. And what it is to be a human, a mind in the world, etc. It covered a lot, but many of the topics seemed a little bit unclear to me. So that's why I decided to look further in the topics. And one of the topics that intrigued me in particular was Tolle, which I never came across before. I did a quick Google search on him and had my doubts about him. I thought he was perhaps a charlatan peddling this new age sort of mumbo jumbo. But when I came to read his books, for instance, his first one, The Power of Now, I gave him a chance. And actually, the book was extremely well reasoned. And it's clear that this author, while he had his own difficult personal experiences and emotions, he deeply understood all the philosophical and psychological theories that came before him.
Nice.
And so for that, it was a pretty impressive book.
What like sparked your imagination? What's something that after reading the book you were like, oh, that's actually very interesting, and it gave you a different understanding of your reality, you know, your subjective experience.
Sure. So when I came across the book, my impression of the content or the first chapter in particular was that this book could help a lot of people. So most people are stuck inside their own heads, right? So like they tend to overthink and overanalyze all situations and generally think towards the negative things happening, and that makes life quite difficult and often quite unbearable for many people. And luckily, I don't have this sort of problem. At least I don't think so myself. I find myself someone who is quite analytical. Yeah, at the same time, my brain can turn off and do things and maybe watch, let's say, like mindless entertainment, well, what I like to call mindless entertainment, without thinking about other things. So I might actually watch the game and actually think about the game, right? So I think I'm pretty lucky in that regard.
You're
But
able
I can
to be in the
understand how
moment.
it would, yeah, I would say I can be in the moment. Obviously, when I'm stressed, I will think about the thing that's making me stressed out. But in general, I don't find myself to be a particular stressed person.
Okay. And actually, that's one of the discussions that we were trying to have before, was to understand the distinction that the books try to make about the mind, the self, and the being, you know? So your thinking head and you just existing, which is also a point that I tried to make in that video, A Message to God, which I can actually say a little bit like, why is it that I say a message to God and it talks about humans? But it is because I think that we make our own reality. And thus, for me, asking of an external God maybe shifting the responsibility to someone else, whereas we have a choice to make every day. And that's the message to God, meaning message to humans. Like we can actually, you know, dig deeper into what it means to be alive and shape the reality that we want to live in. And that's actually something that we were discussing before, right, David? And I don't think we have the answer. I don't think we'll ever have the answer, but it's interesting to pose this question. So, are we just what we think, or are we more than just what our mind produces? What do you think?
So, are we just our thoughts, or are
Yeah.
we more than that? That's a great question, Gio, and that's something I've gave a lot of thought to actually. Studying all these years, reading through psychology and philosophy and etc. So I guess like what we experience the most are our thoughts, right? So if we're a mind, we can't really get away from the fact that the thoughts are going to be the vast majority of um, what we perceive, right? So our perceptions and how the perceptions interact with the external events and experiences that we have. But we are also more than a mind, right? For instance, we are a body. Importantly, we are like a physical body. The mind is part of a brain, which is a physical object itself. Philosophers and people might debate whether the mind is actually separate from the body, but at least we know a body probably exists. And also
I love
thinking
that you
about,
say probably exist. But
I'm
from what we
saying
can perceive,
probably,
yeah, from what we can perceive, we're here, right? Yeah. If you put your hand on fire, it's gonna burn. If you cut yourself, it's gonna hurt. So that feels pretty real. Yeah. But yeah,
right. So insofar as I'm experiencing these things, it seems that physical objects are real, but we don't actually know. And that's a topic of a more complex philosophical discussion, which gets pretty technical pretty quickly. Now, we are these things, right? So we're like a body and a mind, but we're also more than just what's in the mind. So the thoughts, we are part of something greater, um, a world, a universe, and we're also people within a society. So
right,
we are all of these things at once, and so we're not just our thoughts, so to speak.
right. Also, before you were saying something about the animal instinct, right? You said
Right.
sometimes we have some thoughts and we kind of have to follow that, like a lion would have to hunt down the gazelle, and they will want to eat it, right? And you were arguing, and now we can kind of maybe argue more about this, that we cannot really separate from that primordial instinct of like some animal desires, which could be, like the survival. If we don't eat the food, if we don't drink water, we're gonna die. um can you expand a little bit more on what does it mean for you, and how preponderant it is in the human experience, this survival instinct?
Sure. So let's think about what we are as humans, right? So we've come a long way as a civilization, building great things like buildings and roads and great civilizations and literature and history, etc. So animals don't have this, right? So we're above animals in the sense that we have a intellect and reason and a sense of beauty, art, etc. All these things that animals don't have. But part of who we are is animal in nature. We aren't necessarily beasts, but we are ultimately animal in nature. So one of the animal instincts, the desire to survive, which leads to Darwinism, for instance, is one of the forces that guides us. And so how that would manifest itself is by competing with others, right? So animals, they compete with others. And if a lion, for instance, thinks I'm gonna kill one of the other male lions in the herd because he's competing with me for survival or as the leader of the group, right? So I'm gonna kill him and I'm not gonna give any second thought to that. But as human beings, we might actually think, if I kill my neighbor who's competing with me, well, is that moral? Is that going to be good for me? Am I going to end up in jail? And there are many other human um, problems and considerations that we have that animals can't conceive of because we are superior beings.
Okay. On the superior being, I have a problem, just because I don't think we know enough about the animals In the sense, yeah, science can tell us, but I argue that actually we don't know enough. And maybe the animals are superior to us because they figured out, okay, well, maybe I just need to eat you, but that's part of the circle of life. Whereas humans make such a big deal with the moral problems, and yeah, that we have this thinking head. But that's exactly the point that I'm struggling with, which is, this animal instinct that we all feel. Sometimes you have the urge to do something, right? Should we follow it more, or should we try to repress it? you know if I have the urge of doing something that is morally wrong, should I follow the instinct, or should I try to correct it? you know
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a pretty difficult question. So, in terms of animal instincts, of which the survival instinct is the most important, to not follow that instinct will create a lot of problems for you. And in particular, if you ignored it completely, you'd probably die, and pretty quickly too. So, we can't completely repress the animal instinct, nor would it be a wise idea to do so, because if you are repressing some emotions that you naturally feel, for instance, your neighbor, he's uh, becoming more successful and more powerful than you, to repress that observation can ultimately be dangerous, right? So that's why we have these sort of instincts. It's because uh, there are survival instincts, right? So if we completely ignore them, we'd be pretty out of existence pretty quickly. But to act on them immediately, to say, for instance, my neighbor's getting successful, I should kill him, or I should
that
make his life
escalated
very
quickly.
difficult. Uh,
you know
that would also be going too far, right? So we should consider the fact that our neighbor is being successful and think, what could I do to make myself more successful? Instead of focusing on the negative, how can I make his life difficult?
right, okay. I i don't agree on the fact that if I see him being more successful than me, the only path is to say I need to be more successful than him, because that's like playing into the cycle of competition. And that was also the point that I wanted to make about human, like, survival and the ability to have a thinking mind, which you said is what separates us from the animals. And that's why I said about being superior I have a problem with, because as human beings, what we ultimately most of the time result in doing is playing to the game of competition, or like, oh, he's successful, thus I also need to be successful. But then I think, why couldn't it just be that I'm happy for him about being successful? And that's about the animal instinct.
Right.
How, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes. It's
and I think that's the society that we've built. And a little bit of criticism about the study that we have done in St. Gallen. Maybe I'm going to get some backlash on this, but I actually think that plays a lot into this direction of, I see my classmate doing good, and I need to beat him. I need to be better than. And then I say, okay, potentially that's a way, but is that the way? Is that how it is supposed to be? Is that how we're supposed to use our thinking mind? In
well, it
order,
creates a never-ending cycle, right? So
yeah, like look at society right now. We have empires. We live in the age of the American empire, which is clearly in decline, right? And what they decide to do in order to protect their empire, their status, is to attack another country to preserve their superiority. And one could argue that's the natural progression, right? That's how we work. And I say, is that how we have to work? Is that the ultimate way in which we have to live our life? Like, you know what I mean? Is that the best use of human creativity and the thinking mind that allows us to create cities, build super fast trains, build whatever, cure disease? Like, we're the only animals that is able to create medicine and cure itself. Some animals might be able to, find some cure, but it's quite limited. We have many more options, right? A- and that's also where I am honestly a little bit depressed about the state of the world, because what to do? It's like we just need to give in to this animal instinct of I need to be better than you, or I need to prove you wrong, or going back to Tolle, I said it wrong, and just being and realize that we are more than our thinking head. What do you think? Sorry for the long.
Yeah, no worries. So I was thinking, competition and the animal part of us, it cannot be completely extinguished, right? So because if we were to extinguish it, perhaps people would realize that some of these things, like getting a good job, making enough money to pay my bills, is not important, and then they would just end up not having any money and not having any food, and they would eventually die, right? So that's
It's because we
the
live in this
natural.
way. Like, because we build societies that are built on money, and then you need money to survive, and you need money to pay that, and so on. That's the world that we conceptualized. And then I agree with you. If you don't do the minimal part, you wouldn't be able to survive and pay for the grocery store. But yeah, sorry, I don't. Please continue on your thought.
Right. So this sort of survival instinct, as well as competition between humans, it's a natural part of our society. If you look at any types of animals, for instance, like lions or tigers, they all compete amongst each other. As social creatures, not competing is not possible. But in my opinion, it's possible to take our superior mental abilities, for instance, the intellect, the reason, the appreciation of beauty, etc., and direct it towards more positive goals. So, for instance, competing two different societies, competing instead based on which is stronger, which has a more powerful military can pummel the other into the ground. We should instead compete on aspects such as prosperity uh, or beauty or architecture or human development, these sorts of things. We can channel our competitive energies into positive goals instead of focusing on how can I be stronger than him. I would argue that we can instead compete on how can we have a more holistic and positive society as opposed to one that is just physically stronger and economically more developed.
Right. I mean, that's the hope. The thing is, if we look at history, it seems as though that's not the case. It always end up with a war, and the most powerful wanting to prevail on the weak. And that's kind of like, at least from the history that we've been told, that seems to be the cycle that we're in, right? As a
Right. I would say that this is perhaps a part of human nature, what Thomas Hobbes described as the law of the jungle, or how life under these conditions is nasty, brutish, and short. So, taken to the natural conclusion, if we were to be fighting with each other all the time with violent means, then our lives would indeed be as Hobbes described. But at the same time, I believe that to an extent, competition is inevitable between humans. What I describe, I created a new theory myself, saying that like when we enter some sort of competitive realm, for instance, be it like the market or competition for jobs or promotions, essentially, we consent to some sort of these ideas, such that there will be an inevitable competition, and people will use some sort of underhanded, possibly, tactics to get ahead. So perhaps Hobbes's worldview is part of the human experience, but it is not the whole thing, right? So if we just focus and do what Hobbes and Machiavelli, for instance, said, then
You love Machiavelli.
our lives, and probably you too, Gio, then our lives would be very difficult. But then we also have to be aware that we live in a society with rules, with customs, with respect for other humans, that leads to what Hume described as a social contract among humans, right? So to improve our lives, we are consenting to some limitations in our own abilities and desires to harm our neighbors for benefits, such as safety and security, for instance.
Right. But then again, do you think like we these are the rule of the game that we as humans have devised? I argue. So in the wake of artificial intelligence and what what's to come, that it seems so scary, right? But could we not devise a more like spiritually awakened society where we don't like completely accept that these are the rules of the game and that competition is I agree with you that we can never get rid of it, but
Right.
could we
And
not design a system that is less harmful to us and to the world around us? What do you think? Do we have even the like I'm looking for hope here, you know? Yeah. Do we even have
well,
the means to devise such a system, or is are we simply doomed into this is the reality that we live in, you know?
we're definitely not doomed. It is a part of who we are, but it's not the whole picture of who we are, right? So if you lived in Marcus Aurelius's Rome, that was a prosperous society. It was a very well run government. It was a very well run civilization that was able to achieve many things, and that is what I consider the epitome of good government, right? So Marcus Aurelius was a ideal and great leader. But imagine you lived in a different sort of Rome in which people were trying to kill each other all the time. For instance, life under Nero, then your life would be not so great. So I conceive a world which is different from the Machiavellian or Hobbesian world. You could have a world in which we're not trying to kill each other all the time if everyone was like Marcus Aurelius, for instance.
Okay, okay. How can we become more like Marco Aurelius? What like I don't know enough. Like what would be the step to be, according to your view, more like Marco Aurelius?
I would say reading more. So reading about philosophy, different types of philosophy, learning about other human beings by talking with them, and maybe reading about philosophy as well. Then we would be exposed to a broad range of perspectives, not just necessarily the ones that we knew, which we grew up with, because that may not be the whole picture. There may be many different ways to live a life. We can consider foreign philosophies such as Chinese philosophy or Buddhism or Indian philosophy. Maybe these sorts of things will give us insights on how we could live our lives differently.
You know, on this actually, I just came back from a volunteering experience in Tanzania,
Mm-hmm.
and we were working with Maasai people, mostly women.
Yeah.
And one weekend I spent, I stayed 2 nights, and I slept with a family
Mm-hmm.
together with my girlfriend, and we stayed there. No internet, no phone. They live on houses made of mud. They have cattle, and they, you know, they raise crops. Yeah, so they like do maize. And I came into it with an open mind, you know, saying I don't know this way of living. I'm not used to this. I come from what we call civilized society, technology, and all of that. But I also personally I feel the disconnect a little bit with this world. So I'm looking for other ways in which life could be approached. So that's how I went into this experience. And when I was there, I have to say, first thing, one day lasted so long. You know, we woke up at
Yeah.
6 in the morning, and first thing you go check on the goats, and you milk some milk. a little bit because you need to leave it for the animal, and and then you go check on the farm, like on the land that all the crop is doing well, and then you sit, you relax, you look at the sky, you play with the children, and I felt great. Like I was just being right, going back to Tolle. I was just sitting there playing with the kids, not doing much because like life had more of a natural rhythm, you know. And another thing, the most striking thing for me was that these people have been living there. Well, this family precisely have lived there for 7 years, and every day they make a fire, and then in the evening, and the cows and the goats go around the fire, which I thought, wow. So like the boys are chilling around the fire. Maybe they're telling each other stories. But what was striking to me is that they never collect wood. At least this family didn't. They would just go and walk around the savannah, and they will always find wood. So what struck me was, so they've been living here for 7 years, and every day they're still able to find the wood that they need to make the fire. I mean, you are in Africa, it's hot, so probably it's not a necessity. But what struck me was the way in which they were living in apparent peace with their surrounding. And of course, they're not rich to our standard, definitely not. But I never heard them complain about something, or, and the smiles and the happiness that they were sharing. I don't know, maybe it could just be an act that I don't have enough data point to say that's they're living better. But it definitely got me thinking, wow, there is also another way of living life which is much more connected to nature, and they seem to be in peace, and they're definitely not breaking their backs. Like they're not running around and working like crazy. It's like much more, they call it pole pole in Swahili, which means slowly slowly. And that gave me a lot of hope also, that you know maybe it is because our thinking head took too much of predominance in our society, but actually you can live in peace already with what's available in the environment. So it was really heartwarming. But it was just to say that I think there are examples in the world of a system that can work in harmony. Um, but probably the issues that we face as a civilization is the scale of things. Like everything is super interconnected. Like you and I are talking. I'm in Italy right now. You're in Toronto. That's their world is limited to their savanna and their animals, and so maybe if you were to apply that to a more broader scale, it wouldn't work. But I don't know, it definitely got me thinking and appreciative of what I have, but on the other hand of what I don't have, that is this connection to the environment, to the people around me, you know
Yeah, so that's definitely simpler and more simpler existence, a more it's definitely a simpler and more original existence, living in nature in Africa. But I wouldn't go so far as to say they have less problems or they have less things on their minds necessarily,
yeah.
because, right? So, like, for instance, to get water is not an easy task. If you don't have running water in your house, you probably have to travel 2 hours by foot to some faraway location to retrieve the water and carry it 2 hours back to your house. And food, for instance, it's not particularly obvious how you're gonna get it, right? So the Maasai, they were originally hunters. They're a hunter tribe, right? So they do hunt, and it's not like if you're living in Africa.
Actually,
You're
Masai are more of like they're farmers. Like they would,
now they
they would
are, or I heard they were originally hunters, but I'm not sure. I'm not too
not sure
confident
on
of what
this,
I'm.
but as of now, the Masai community usually is that they're yeah they're farmers, so
Right,
they
right, okay,
they have their herd of animals, and that's that for self sustenance, and they if they have more, they usually trade in for food. So that's yeah. But I totally agree with you. Like I'm not saying that that's the way of living because, like you mentioned, and also for them, like they look at us and they're like, I want to be more like you. So they were like, I don't even have electricity
definitely,
in my house. Yeah, you know, right?
yeah, definitely,
But I look at them and I say, look, I mean, I know, or either I am in the wrong that I'm not able to appreciate what I have because it's a lot. Like I don't have problem of running water, electricity, and so on. But still, the happiness that I felt there, the way in which they approach everyday challenges, like going to get water, it seemed much more natural to me than, for example, the career ladders that we devised in the civilized society, where there is stress and this competition where we want to almost kill each other if the other person is better than us. And it's just to say that we can take inspiration from that way of living and maybe find a more sustainable compromise, because in our society we do have a lot of advantages in terms of the technology and access to resources, but still this never-ending competition doesn't, you know, it's
go away.
counterproductive to us. Yeah, yeah, never seems to be enough, right?
Yeah, I guess as someone who also had one of these experiences, so when I was in high school, I went to Costa Rica to do some volunteering. It was the classic volunteering stuff, planting trees, painting fences, painting houses. It was definitely a more basic and fundamental experience and way of life. And I also would agree with Gio and say that I was happier during that time as well. But I'm not sure if I was living there and just not being like let's say like volunteering tourist, would my life be equally as great? I'm not sure about that because essentially at the end of the day during this time, as much as you like it or not, you're just tourists, right? So like you go there, you bring in some money, and then they're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
thanks,
And then
now
you're
we have
gonna
more money."
leave.
Right, you're gonna leave exactly. So I'm not sure to what extent like this experience is being over idealized because like we're just giving a tourist perspective. It's not like the actual perspective of what it is like to be a Maasai in Tanzania, or what it is like to be an indigenous in Costa Rica, right? So we don't actually know what it's like to be them. This goes to Nagel's idea of a bat. We don't actually know unless we are that person. But I would agree with you that like you're probably someone who enjoys being in nature, Gio, that you're more at peace in nature. Whereas I think maybe for me, I'm more at peace in my own house. I don't know, maybe that's just the way it is.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I'm not saying that that's the way, but it goes back to the question I asked you before. Can we devise another like because now we are in a pretty transitionary period with what all that is happening in the world. Like we
Mhm.
didn't mention, but that just started the war in Iran that seems to be escalating, and AI that they say that it's going to replace all the jobs and people are going to have to find out what to do. I'm like, there's two ways of looking at this. One, like the doomsday scenario where everything goes to shit, or it is an opportunity to devise a different system. What I hear around is that nobody's actually proposing anything enlightening, right? Like they're just saying, oh, this is just the way it's going to be. But so I look at it as an opportunity to be like, can we actually try to shape a society that can take the good stuff of our current system, where we do have running water, in our home where we do have electricity that is helpful and heating, while still respecting the natural world and finding an equilibrium. You know, it feels like nobody's talking anymore about climate change. Seems like climate change disappeared. If you talk like probably not even 2 years ago, it seemed like we were on the verge of extinction, right? Because rising temperature and all of that. Now it's not there anymore. So, what is it? Is that are we actually going extinct because of climate change, or is not a problem anymore? You know,
Right, there's a lot really that's going on recently, right? Like the what's changing in the world has been so fast and so dramatic that it's really hard to think that we're even in the same world as we were in 2, 3 years ago. Um, but uh, is climate change real? I guess which you just asked. I don't even know. It's really hard to say because like I'm someone who does a lot of questioning, right? So I consider myself like a part-time philosopher. So is this climate change part of our overthinking uh, minds that we're taking some climate change that's been happening? I agree with that, and taking it to the ultimate conclusion that it's going to blow up the world? Or is it that perhaps climate change was not happening at the scale as we thought it was happening? It's really hard to say based on how much we know about humans, right? Like how they tend to overthink things, to overfear and fear for the worst. I don't even know if climate change is as bad as it is. It's like like as someone who philosophizes, um, I tend to live in a state of ambiguity at all times. I'm not sure if that's a sign of stupidity or intelligence, but that's the way I am. On your question of like, could we design a better society? I'm thinking with all these changes that we've had with AI, unfortunately, the what's going to happen is we're going to need less people working, right? So that's going to be the new normal. And what is the world going to look like when there are less people working? Well, perhaps we're going to have more people doing other things, maybe things that they like. For instance, maybe playing games on stream channels such as Twitch for others to see, and everyone would be having more enjoyable experience that way. At least that's how I would look at things. But perhaps someone could draw inspiration from Asian countries such as Bhutan, who have taken the state of living in peace with nature to a new level of creating communities that coexist with nature, but also leverage the benefits of technology and civilization. So
that's
perhaps
actually
you could
super
have
interesting. Do you have any example of like a community that they built?
um, I'm not too well informed in that subject, but
Well, even I mean, on the Bhutan, actually, I think I'm gonna research a little bit about this way of living because this is something that interests me, and I'm also very interested, in tiny homes community, and this is something that I'm researching as a hobby myself, uh, and ways in which we can live in peace with nature. So definitely interesting to hear more about this Bhutan example. But I want to go towards a closing in this discussion that we had, and kind of bring it back because we started off with Eckhart Tolle. Did I say it wrong again?
Tola, Tola, Tola.
Oh, Tolle. Oh, Tolle. And how we are so identified with the thinking mind and less tuned in with the being. And yeah, maybe you wanna speak more again on how this book has enlightened you a little bit more into this being aspect instead of the thinking mind. And then we kind of try to close and give a sense to all that we discussed because we also put in climate change, the war, that to me, they're all symptoms of a world too identified with the thinking mind and less in tune with the being. But I want to hear your thoughts and if you have any arguments or concluding thoughts?
Sure. So I guess I'm someone who earlier in my trading days, or because like trading is a very competitive activity, right? I was someone who was very stressed about what is going to happen. Is the stock market going to go up or down? But as I've uh, gotten older, I've tried to start controlling the things that I can control and worrying less about the things that I can't really control, right? So if you think about what the overthinking mind is at the end of the day, it's just the mind who wants to survive at all costs, right? He's concerned with his survival and he will overthink so that he can try to control everything, even those things that are not in his control. And so recently I've started accepting the fact that some things are truly not in my control. I should just do my best and see what follows after. Now, if that necessarily equates with being or a harmonious existence with nature, it could be. I'm not entirely sure that I'm a person completely free of civilization, but I definitely would say that I can experience and see things more clearly, right? So it's not like when I'm talking with my parents or my friends, for instance, all I'm thinking about is the stock market going to go up or down tomorrow? I am more present in that moment. I'm able to shut those thoughts off because I know that by thinking about that stuff, it's not going to change anything. I did my best, what I could during the trading day, and what happens after the trading day, it's beyond my control, right? So I'm starting to come to acceptance with some things that I can control and I can't control. But maybe that's just a part of getting older, that we are able to notice these patterns more clearly.
Actually, that's super interesting, and it probably can help people in this time. I'm definitely helps me because I'm somebody that if I get in too deep and I start reading news about the war or the Epstein file, just to name something, I could get really depressed. But
Right.
like you clearly mentioned, that there isn't much that I can do in the sense of, or there is some stuff that I can do. Let's talk about it. Say that what my opinion is and how absurd I find it. But letting that thought control me, maybe not the best way that I can deal with it. And you still have to talk to your parents and to your girlfriend or to your friend. And there's a lot of moments in which you can just be present and, yeah, fully immerse yourself with that moment instead of letting the thinking mind overcome you. That's probably a great advice, David, and thank you so much for that because I think that could be super helpful to kind of step back a little bit and realize, okay, but in my life, I'm still here and I still have to talk to my friends. I still have to do my job. And yeah, and I like also what you said about the circle of influence, right? There's some things that you can influence, such as the relationship maybe with your parents, but what you cannot influence is, or not directly, let's say, is if Trump's decide to bomb Iran. So, not to say that we shouldn't care, but at least take a step back and still realize I'm here now and I should try to enjoy those moments. And probably, actually, if you think about it, because I believe everything is connected, if you're doing the work with the people that you care about and the circle of friends, you are indeed contributing to bringing harmony to this world. Because if you're kind to your parents and to your friends, in a way, you're doing what you can to bring peace, right? More than just having being depressed about the state of the world as it is right now. So that
Right. So, like going back to, I guess how you got depressed by reading the news. That's definitely an experience that I had in the past. So I would say like Jill, that I'm probably like 2 or 3 years older than you. So I've definitely been where you were at before when I thought
you're a
like what's go.
dinosaur.
Yeah, I am pretty old. But like reading the
affecting
news is
all
pretty
the
natural for like someone who's just emerged into society and that's becoming a part of society. But like I always think like to what extent is the news being planted there, right? By people who own the newspapers, like to what extent is this stuff actually real, right? So like for instance, the Epstein files, like something which we're all obsessing about recently, is it wasn't there like a year ago or 2 years ago. It was added, right? It's I'm not like denying that like these things happen, but I'm saying that like these things were never a part of my life, but all of a sudden, because I'm now reading them on the newspaper every day, something that was someone else's life is just now a huge part of my life, which I find a little bit absurd, right? So I'm not denying that
timing,
the
you
fact
say.
I'm not denying the fact that like these like things like the war happened, or like the difficult experiences and that these people are going through. Not at all. But I'm just saying that we're just taking things that are should be concerning other people and making it our whole lives, which I think doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe I'm being too egotistical or being too um, uh, nihilistic or even um, even cynical, but um, like I try to keep myself independent of all the bad things going on in the world, because there's always bad things going on in the world, because the world is so vast, right? But at the same time, there's also many good things going on in the world. What if we were to instead read more about the good things that are going on in the world? For instance, how the Bhutanese are better living their lives, and perhaps focus less on the bad things.
That's actually an interesting take. I think there one could have a balanced approach. I, it speaks a lot, like the timing about that you're saying about this Epstein file. Like you said, these things were happening for decades, and probably the government knew already for many years. And why now? Why are they
Right.
being released right now? Yeah, we could go into conspiracy theory as to why that is. But yeah, you're right in the sense that, again, how much of that is planted, and that it's trying to shape a narrative that could actually influence our life a lot, in a lot of ways that we are actually not even aware of. So maybe we should be critical about that. Are these ideas being planted in my brain right now? Because like you said, like 2 years ago you weren't even thinking, and all of a sudden we're all thinking about this Epstein file, which to some extent I think it's great that this stuff is coming out. Like, to me, it's been really wide eye opening, because I feel betrayed in my worldview, that I think I have to behave good, and if I work hard, things will be rewarded. And then I realized that actually maybe that's not the way the world works. But to on the other hand, not let this thing control you, and still focus on what you can do and the good things that are happening, because there are great people doing some great stuff. uh but yeah, so thank you also for bringing this different perspective. Definitely helps me great deal.
Sure.
David, do you have any other concluding remarks, or do you want to leave it here, or maybe for another time?
Well, let me say, Gio, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It was definitely a very eye-opening experience for me to go through all these new theories that I never considered before. So that was definitely something I really enjoyed. Um,
Awesome.
okay,
Thank you so much, David. Yeah, I
thank you,
really
Gio.
appreciate it. Va bene. Ciao, everybody. Thank you so much.
Ciao.